class, Revolt. I'm here with always my friend and comrade David Fox, Australian labor leader. How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Right on. And we are honored to have a special guest with us today, Gavin Lockard of Students and Youth for a New America. How's it going, man?
Hey, how's it going, Dustin and David? Good to see you both.
You too, mate.
Right on. Right on. So, well, I guess we're going to keep it short. We're trying to keep it our 2 hours for y'all, maybe even less. So we'll get right into our tradition of doing a labor update. I just want to talk about why we do a labor update. A labor update is a communist tradition. Going back to communist work meetings from the 30s and 40s and on in the United States and all around the world. Working class people in general need to come together and talk about their struggles, talk about how we're treated in the workplace, talk about the issues our communities and our families are going through. And from this, the Communist Party is a transmission belt, and the various organizations that you represent is a transition belt to the work body to better serve the people and to plan action. To make the necessary action to help the working class, from the masses to the masses, as I always believe and Mao put out there. So we'll get right into it. Myself, labor update. I'm doing retail right up behind the Christmas rush, and they are working me to death. We had some bad weather, and I get paid per day. And whenever an accident happened in front of me, or I have a breakdown, this causes me to work longer hours with the same pay, which kind of sucks. Some companies will have, like, if this happens, then you get a little bit of this. I think I get like $20 if I have to take it in the shop for any amount of time, which is almost nothing. It's several hours on the day. I want to talk about a lot of people. I know a lot of people are not doing so well with Christmas coming up. People are more in debt than ever right now. I notice that's a growing trend, especially with these low interest rate. I ain't gonna say nothing about working people trying to get what they're trying to get, but these ruthless capitalists knew exactly what they're doing. We're the ones that paid them back. The banks got bailed out in 2008. They got a $1 trillion interest free, and they paid it back. How they pay it back? That 29% sometimes interest rate that working people paid back. All right, we're gonna go to Gavin. Maybe you can tell us a little bit of your experience as a student.
Yeah, of course. Well, right now I'm a student at Black Hawk College in Moline, Illinois, which is the home of John Deere. And so right now, the state of Illinois has actually moved from tier 4 to tier 3 in terms of lockdown. So we've had to go back a little bit and get a little bit more lockdown than we were before. And so there's that. We had hoped that we would reopen in the spring semester, and now it's looking like it's not going to. And so in terms of the student experience, people are just, everything is pretty much online. Obviously, music classes, certain few other things have to be in person, but we pretty much just have to tough this out in terms of the pandemic. I know there are people have talked about concerns about the Pfizer vaccine, and I kind of wish we had a vaccine that was made by a nonprofit, but it is what it is. And when it comes to sort of the whole situation, it's kind of I'm right on the border of Illinois and Iowa has actually done much worse, and they've had many more cases. And I know the University of Iowa, which is not too far, has really totally locked down, and people often wear the plastic thing called the medical thing in addition to masks. And there are, as far as I know, no in-person classes there. And so it's kind of a situation where people can debate whether or not two wrongs make a right, but it seems like things should have closed down sooner, and but now we just kind of have to deal with it.
Right on, right on. Thanks for everybody joining. If you want to share this out, tweet this out, whatever it is to make this a bigger conversation. Put some questions in the comments, Facebook and YouTube, for our guest later on. David, how's the situation over in Australia?
Well, just on the COVID-19, obviously there's been some outbreaks in the northern beaches of Sydney at the moment, and it's now regarded as a red zone. It's in complete lockdown until Wednesday, and in the rest of Greater Sydney is what we call the orange or amber zone. Our state government here in Victoria have actually advised everyone of Victoria not to travel to Sydney for the Christmas break. It did make a few things up for me. I was going to see my own mother over Christmas and stepdad, but obviously I spoke to them on my phone yesterday. And, obviously, when this all clears, might be able to try to go back and see them. But I am going to see my dad over Christmas in Orange. The rest of New South Wales is at the moment what they call a green zone, so it's relatively quite free. But there's been a lot more cases diagnosed overnight in New South Wales, so we'll just wait and see there. We've been
quick point, yeah. Dave, quick point. It is not advisable in the United States to meet with family. Australia has a different situation out there, just in case the censors are listening. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, right, okay. No worries. I'm not going to well, what happened? This was sadly, and it was something happened. I think someone coming back from overseas obviously had it, and then they spread it from there. So, look, even summertime, it's not a guarantee against this virus. So, it's real day at a time stuff at the moment. But I think the most important thing over this breakdown coming out of this, where a lot more people are unemployed. A lot more people are going to be struggling to make ends meet now. Even those who are working, those might have 2-3 jobs just to get by. So we could see further foreclosures on their homes. They're not able to even just pay utility bills such as water and electricity and gas. They obviously will have them cut off. Christmas Day itself is going to be interesting because a lot of churches and other organisations organised Christmas dinners for those who are from homeless people right through to people who have got homes but can't afford even Christmas anymore. And I've seen it's been actually increasing for a number of years now. The whole working families can no longer even just afford a simple Christmas dinner together, so they actually come to these places, enjoy their Christmas there. It's not a really good situation here in Australia at all. Our gross domestic debt is increasing further. It's up nearly to the 1 trillion mark now for a population of 25 million. That's a huge debt for us to handle, and we'll be working class people, working families that will have to pay for it, either through increased prices, further privatisations, you name it. That's what they'll be paying through the teeth. And well, look, to be honest with you, I don't think we'll ever pay something like that ever again. Well, some of the economists did say once it'll take about 3 generations to pay all that off. But for the moment, the amount of money lending that went through during this whole COVID-19 through the year. And the fact is, the capitalist class will be wanting that back. It wasn't given to us for free out of goodwill. They obviously want that. They'll be asking for that money back with interest on top of that. And which actually flows into about the tax on workers' rights here in this country. We've had legislation now tabled last week. Well, not this week, gone before in the federal parliament. It's further to erode workers' rights. One big one to be aware of is the what we call a divorce law for unions. So those unions have amalgamated over the years to form a bigger union. Well, that gives the employers or some elements the ability to break away again. One way to do it is to break up big unions or powerful unions into smaller ones, but also to look at one section of workers, say in the construction sector where they've traditionally been militant and won a lot of gains there. Well, that gives then employers and the government the ability then to deregister them deregister the union, where the workers will have no union able to fight for them or represent them industrially in the courts or even on the negotiation table. So these certain things like that, it's basically they've also trying to control unions even more. It's some interesting parallels to what the Nazis did 1930s when they decapitated the union movement, leaders of the union movement, and called the Labour Front. They warmed it in there. Basically, the ceased being unions, basically fighting for interests of workers, where they'd just be basically curtailing the company line or the government line. And obviously, the other bit of legislation there is giving the employers the further ability to dictate the terms and conditions of agreements that you guys in the US call contracts. So especially in the construction sector, where they say, well, this is going to be the Greenfields agreement for the life of a construction project, within they will have the terms dictated to the workers, where and leave those unions the inability to actually negotiate much more improved conditions and wages throughout the life of the project. They're just two of them off the top of my head at the moment. And obviously, we're also looking to the further casualisation of our workforce, which gives the ability to employers to have people locked in casual for long term. So basically, they won't enjoy sick leave, annual leave, or any other conditions that full-time workforce would enjoy. Thank you.
Right on. Good stuff, man. Y'all fighting a good fight over there. There seems to be a crackdown during COVID. It seems like whenever there's masses of unemployed people, they can use it as a club against those who do have a job. Try to push wages down and get rid of the rights we have. We talked about what was going on in India. The people are resisting labor laws, unjust labor laws, inspiring stuff. So we'll get into our news portion of the show. First news item. It's probably been beat to death. It's probably a dead horse by now, but it happened between last week. I think it happened like Monday or something. I'm not sure, but there was a big bit of internet drama between Jimmy Dore and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I'll just give a brief synopsis. Jimmy Dore was pressuring AOC to withhold the vote. I believe the chair vote or the speaker vote. Withhold that vote. Withhold that ability to get the speakership unless she brought her power as speaker is to bring medical care for all to the floor. And she seemed to refuse to want to do that. And that's what Jimmy Dore was suggesting. And there's been a huge attacks on him. My initial statement on Facebook was a little bit flippant. I basically said Jimmy Dore was a liberal, but in my case, a liberal is just someone who's not revolutionary. It wasn't really attack. My position is like my understanding of Lenin is a communist is our goal if we get involved in bourgeois politics. Yes, we're trying to get some reforms if possible for the working people, but our main goal is to expose the bourgeois so-called democratic system is the sham it is. And that's exactly what Jimmy Dore is doing. He's calling her out saying, you said you ran for medical care for all. Why don't you do something about it? She didn't do it. He's exposing her. And if she would have done something, it would have exposed the rest of them. Any other thoughts on this issue?
Oh, well,
David?
Sorry, I didn't jump in there. Well, I've only paid too much scant attention to it. I am aware of what's been going on. Obviously, over in the US, probably a lot more about it, but I am aware of it. But somehow that doesn't surprise me either. Someone who would be Jimmy Dore, who is quite critical and who asks those hard questions, that doesn't surprise me. The establishment, be it the liberals or conservatives, that will go on the attack when presented with hard, actual, factual questions.
Yeah. My understanding is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez started out as a sincere progressive, but she has very quickly played ball with the establishment in terms of becoming a loyalist fast. and that Jimmy Dore, in my opinion, was really right to call out this hypocrisy. Some people speculate that Ocasio may be gunning for a higher position in the Democratic Party, and has recently been denied one. By the way, so that, it doesn't always work to play ball, and so we will see how this turns out.
Right. We're all about finished for the comments. I just realized I had that image up there. That was actually the image of I believe when she was just getting started, and she was actually interviewed by his show, promoting her campaign. One of the earlier supporters of the campaign. I just want to talk about there has been like horrible attacks. It seems like if you don't go along with the Democratic establishment, they will use any and all attacks to go against you. This happened with Tulsi Gabbard. She was told she was a Russian agent. I believe Sanders was called a Russian agent at one point. There is this they root it in very emotional identity politics, and they do these attacks on people that have no grounds other than, oh, you went against somebody in the Democratic Party. Not to say those issues aren't necessary, but this seems to be there's a lot of attack jobs defending the establishment, and Jimmy Dore is being attacked right now. Any more comments on those issues, comrades?
Well, leftists would be, and people in politics in general would be useful to not simply become proxy warriors for the establishment, oligarchs, and the Democratic Party in its extension. So I think that, and one example is that even Jimmy has said that since Ocasio became elected, he's reached out for further interview, and the Democratic Party doesn't let her do that anymore. And when it comes to people, just there's often this herd mentality, and why did Russia sit this one out, right? If you really believe that Russia interfered in the 2016 election, then what happened in this one? Did they? It just, the whole narrative it falls apart. And it really there was a private company that had allegedly bought some ads that were pro-Trump. That's really the nothing burger, the end of the story, as far as I'm concerned.
Any added comments, Comrade Fox?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Jimmy Dore, because we've got one journalist here in Australia, John Pilger. Obviously, you've heard of him. He's wrote many books. He's a brilliant journalist. And the way the mainstream media has handled him, and also how he's questioned politicians, he's had politicians walk out and leave out of his interviews. And when the ruling class goes on the attack like this, it's not because they're being exposed for what they really are. The whole system's been exposed, and AOC is no different from than anyone else in that particular matter. Instead of like explaining, oh look, we're going to promise you all these great things, and we're going to do, just don't rock the boat, and we'll be don't elect us in. The same thing that happens here in Australia when we get promised a lot of stuff. Don't rock the boat. We'll wait till we're in. We'll get this legislation through, and everyone can go home all happy at the end of the day. It doesn't work like that. And I think most important now, it's not a matter of what AOC thinks or anyone of her think as well. It's a matter of actually being organised on the ground, and mass action needs to be backed up. Now, mass action needs to be organised in order to fight for those claims, be it from Medicare to healthcare to whatever else. That's the immediate demands that the masses are facing over there in the US. But I'll just take a little lighter comment. I'm looking at that picture of AOC and Jimmy Dore, and it reminds me of one of those Gary Larson cartoons. You can have a comment under there. Jimmy Dore asked that final question, and the look AOC gives. There was immediate silence before she answered. You could just think of a Gary Larson caption to that. That'd be fantastic.
Right, there was a particular comment I wanted to highlight. Class analysis, shout out on this great comment. Jimmy Dore understands what healthcare means to working class people, which we could push him to become more revolutionary. And AOC, she started, I think she was a bartender or waitress. So, she knows what healthcare means to working class people. I mean, I can go up my own experience coming from, I was at a larger company that had decent benefits, ESOP company, and I recently switched to being a local driver. And as a local driver, my with a smaller company, my health costs went way up. I mean, I'm paying, I would say at least 30%, if not more, of my income is going just to healthcare. So, and a lot of the taxes, even if the tax for medical care for all was 10%, I think a lot of countries is 9 or 8%. Let's say it was 10%. That would save me 20% of my income that I get to keep and put food on the table or go on or do whatever I want to do. And that's somebody with a trade. And then people who don't have health care at all. We got 60,000 people a year in the United States dying from health care. This is criminal negligence. And these individuals' careers are not valued, are not more valuable than human lives. So,
yeah, market-based healthcare is mass murder against the working class, and anyone who thinks that we should continue the system we have is really deluding himself or herself. Sorry, what were you going to say, David?
I was just going to say it's one thing, but look, people like AOC, she's not the only one out there. I mean, we've got them here as well. There's plenty of them actually came from originally from demenial jobs and moved on into Parliament there, but a lot of them seem to have forgotten where they came from as well. As soon as they come into the grandeur of government, or I don't know, what's the equivalent of your Parliament over there, your Congress or Senate, yeah. And so, they're walking all this grandeur. They obviously wined and dined with the capitalists and all these other important governmental and authority figures. They tend to forget where they came from and think, oh, this is a great system, and they don't realise what it was like to be back on Struggle Street. When they were trying to make ends meet. They might make a book about themselves. Oh, yes, I started out here, but now I'm doing very well now these days. But yeah, just sort of put that out there. Some people can be bored off pretty quickly.
Yeah, so we'll move on to the next topic. The next topic is the vaccines. Have already been administered. They've been approved. They're starting to administer. Here's from Monday about the Pfizer vaccine. That was the first one being shipped out. And then I got recently approved the Moderna vaccine. FDA set to approve Vectera. Well, Pfizer's are here in North Carolina. It's going first to healthcare workers, and then it should be going to nursing home workers. I believe they're selling it to Mexico. I think some of the first ones were in the United Kingdom, where they were putting out this vaccine. It's a 2-dose. They're saying it's 95% effective. And this is a lot of hope for people. It's working people. It's oppressed people that had been dying from this. We're the ones that have been forced to continue to work as essential workers. A lot of people have been forced to work through the vaccine. I mean, there's no sick leave at a lot of these places. It's either pay the bills or work sick. And that just spreads it further. I actually got a little bit of a highlight, a positive bit of internationalism in promoting peace amongst filmmaker Oliver Stone. Actually was in Russia to film a documentary on the nuclear energy. And he actually got the Russian vaccine, I believe the Sputnik, named after the first human satellite put into space. And there's a lot of people in the United States, a lot of fear mongering and a lot of hate and a lot of xenophobia. Like, oh, you can't trust Russia, you can't trust China. And that's absolutely not the case. I'll say it time and time again, like I think Ashada Shakur, Panther, only a fool lets them tell him who their enemy is. Anything more, comrades, on that issue or the vaccine in general?
Yeah, and Malcolm X said that if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating those who are oppressing well, sorry, have you hating those who are oppressed and loving those who are doing the oppressing.
Mm.
And it seems that the biggest anti-vaxxers in the world are the New York Times and the Washington Post, because they wanna quibble with the Russian vaccine and the upcoming vaccines of others and things of that nature.
Mm.
So it's there's the whole situation has become so much more politically charged than it should be. We should just be getting people the care that they need. But imperialism runs rampant. It can't let other countries succeed. Certainly they don't. I mean, that's part of the reason the U.S. media is not covering the strike in India, is because they don't want us to get any ideas over here. So I think that we should just kind of we should demand that they allow vaccines to be imported. And if anything, I mean, it seems that in terms of the tests, the Sputnik vaccine may even be a little bit more promising than some of the ones here.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because here in Australia, the same thing's happening. It's they're criticising, especially not just the Sputnik one, but the Chinese equivalent of the vaccine. But what the media mouthpiece has been doing, they're obviously the mouthpiece of the imperialists, the capitalist class, and obviously what Pfizer and Moderna don't want you to do is go out and get their competition. They regard the Russian vaccines or the Chinese ones as competition. Interesting though, they were speaking highly, praising of the vaccine being developed in India. Interesting enough. So they've obviously some trade deals and that have been happening behind the scenes there as well. But that'd be no doubt under license from Pfizer or Moderna or perhaps be some capitalist enterprise. And what Pfizer and Moderna want to use this situation is to monopolise the whole market. And that's what capitalism does. It will further monopolise and further and try and push all the other players out. So they don't want, like myself, you and I, or anyone else are there to buy any of the alternatives. And so that's what I actually pointed that out the other day to some people. And it's interesting. They said, "Oh, gee, we didn't see it that way." I said, "No, that's what you're seeing." They're actually speaking of those why they criticise the Chinese one or their Sputnik and claiming all sorts of things. These haven't been thoroughly tested and sowing seeds of doubt. It's like, well, Pfizer and Moderna don't want you to buy those products. They don't want you to get the vaccine from them. They want you to come back to us. And of course they'll promote it. They'll say, we're the best. We've had this thoroughly tested. We've ticked all the boxes. It's all good to go. But that's what we're seeing down here against. It's the whole monopoly of using this opportunity to try and monopolise the pharmaceutical market, be it for a vaccine or anything else, for that matter. Mm. Is Dust with us?
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh yeah, so you've seen.
I had an internet connection. Continue.
Good.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next issue. Sorry about that. It was a slight internet connection. I just wanted to highlight.
That's all good. That happened.
Okay. I just want to highlight this one comment here. And I actually saw this in the news myself. At Stafford Hospital in California, there's been big protests. The hospital administrators grabbed up all the vaccine doses for themselves and their friends, and frontline workers are angry. And this is an interesting story. So everybody in the world wants this vaccine, and governments are working hard to get it to the people who need it, the people who could spread it, the people on the front lines fighting for it. And this hospital administration decided, oh, we work at the hospital. We're going to get it. We're going to get the vaccine, not the frontline workers. And the people are pissed, and they're doing something about it. This is capitalism in the United States. This is how much power the government has. It's almost like a libertarian government in the United States, so they can't even regulate the hospitals. And any response to that specific situation.
And which vaccine are you referring to, Dust?
I believe the only one that's gone out so far is the Pfizer.
Okay, that's what you're trying to. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the U.S. it is kind of a libertarian government in the sense of, I guess libertarians would prefer no regulators, but the regulators have been captured because there's no limit on the bribery. So it's I mean, they've got their wish in a sense, and so that's part of the reason that almost nothing can be done legislatively in the U.S. that helps the working class is because, the EPA is captured by anti-environmental groups, and the NIH is in some ways captured by anti-health groups, and the Department of Education, against public education and things of that nature. So, we need a new government that will actually fight for working people.
Exactly. And just looking at that little comment, the big concern out of that too is how a black market could develop out of this. If those are then trying to seize these vaccines away from the general public, especially the working class, the poor, working poor, or the vulnerable, and then try and sell it back to them at a higher price. So some sort of black market, aka criminal, organised crime, could be playing rife on this as well, which obviously has got the blessing of the bourgeoisie on this anyway. They don't care as long as they make their profit out of it, and just shows you once again the utter contempt they hold for the people's general well-being and health. Like here in Australia, when it was a push to get everyone back to work to try to, get the economy going, you can just hear it from our federal politicians and our federal government, who played a very poor role and still play a very poor role in this whole COVID-19. It's been left up to the state governments to try and get this to deal with it. The fact is, they're more concerned in getting business back as usual. They're not concerned about our well-being. And when we're talking about these vaccines, that they could have done a lot more too to actually make sure we've got the vaccines now, all in the start of the year. We have to wait till March until the first batch come to Australia. Even though, around the world, we might have it under control, but just what's been Sydney has shown, you only need 1 or 2 cases and it can spread like wildfire very quickly.
Yeah, and it seems like by and large, as Dr. Tim Anderson and others have pointed out, by and large, the capitalist countries that are really dominated by profits have done a poor job in terms of not putting people first at all. And it sounds to me like, I'm certainly no expert on Australia, but it sounds to me that that's a similar case in Australia as many, many other Western capitalist countries.
That's right.
Some of the countries that have really fought the vaccine, it seems, are more independent countries like China, Syria, Russia, a number
Cuba.
of others. Some have made the argument that there are other factors as well. Certainly, like climate. You can talk about viruses not spreading as well in hot climates in Middle Eastern and African countries that have done a good job. So.
I'm joining in stream. I think I'm back.
Oh, did you lose me or did I lose you?
Yeah, I just dropped out all of a sudden. I don't know, for some unknown reason. Dusty, you still with us? He's
I think we might have lost Dust.
We're still live.
Yeah. So, have there been a lot of? Have there been a lot of differences between the Australian state governments?
Yes, certainly. Well, for example, where I live in Victoria here, and our state government here, the Daniel Andrews state government, they enforced a pretty strict lockdown, especially in Melbourne. They went to what we call level 4 lockdown. The rest of regional Victoria was level 3 during when we had the second peak of it. But they had to get this under control because it was just spreading like wildfire. Pardon me. Excuse me for a sec. Bit of dust. And what happened? Well, let's just get back to it. Most of the cases were in Melbourne. We had some regional. They did to get that back down, but we had to go for an intense lockdown like that for a good solid 2 months and to get the situation under control. And
I'm back.
In fact, now I think we've had well over a month and a half now of 0 cases, no community spread at all here in Victoria. We've been very fortunate. I think that was left up to them. But the attacks on the Victorian government here from the federal government, from its was just really horrendous, both from the Murdoch media as well. So some of the Murdoch media, like they just think, oh, even to them, even some COVID-19 didn't exist. It was just a flu for some of them. And these people are experts in nothing besides spreading lies and vile and poison everywhere. And the fact is, the New South Wales government, which is supposed to be a conservative or liberal, it's quite actually interesting, just the politics. It's called a liberal government, but it's not liberal in the sense what you guys would know. It's actually conservative, and it was supposed to be. And anyway, they just they were just pretty relaxed about it. They did tell people, oh, you can cover up if you want. Yeah, it's not compulsory anything. And now all of a sudden there's cases increasing. Has the federal government criticised them on the attack about that? No, absolutely not. Not one. The attacks they did was on Labor governments. The one in Victoria, Queensland had a border lockdown as well, and Western Australia. They said no one's coming into our state at all, and they kept actually their cases zero. Pretty much across, they had it all under control, but they were attacked by both big business, especially the mining industry, Murdoch media, and the federal government attacked them on. But when they were doing the right thing, but they didn't attack those governments that were pretty lax about it. And I saw those interesting parallels both in where the US, where Trump was demonising those states that were trying to do something, and predominantly they were Democrat run. But the fact is, at the end of the day, you could see they were just playing the politics and getting back to business as usual. But now it's such a worse situation, and especially for a population like yourselves. I think you're about 350 million. That you think any government would just put the politics to a side. We've got a situation here. Let's get this under control very quickly and deal with it. But no. And they just leave it up to the respective states to try and deal with it. Here you go. Oh, by the way, you can't have any money, you can't have any funding and listing and everything else. We're just going to hold that all ourselves. And just, it particularly a very poor response as well. I think other capitalist nations, and Europe is a classic example, Scandinavia, Sweden, for their herd immunity and allowing everyone just to go as business as usual, they're paying a very big cost for that now, and so is the UK. But I see the anti-imperialist nations are trying to do something. They actually have to move forward too, which is, it just comes to show you, especially countries like Vietnam, China, Korea, North Korea, or Democratic People's Republic, Korea, Cuba, they're right at the forefront and advancing forward. So comes to show the system shows there which is more superior system, socialism or capitalism, and we all know the answer to that one.
All right. Sorry about that connection. Yeah. Did the stream continue? I'm guessing the stream continued without me. That's fine. That's good. I'm hopefully we can talk about COVID. I guess we'll move it along to the next news item. Oh, did we skipped let's see, David Fox, I forgot to say, well, you had a situation between China and Australia with coal imports.
Yes. Yep. Well, just recently, China's now imposed a massive tariff to a ban on Australian coal exports to China. Its main primary producer for coal. Obviously, they were seeking their coal from other sources as well, but one of the major exporters to China, both coking and thermal coal. It's mainly thermal coal, which is more for power generation. I'm hearing an echo there. Is that all right?
Sorry. Go. I got rid of it. Go ahead.
And obviously, it's further of the deteriorating diplomatic relations between Australia and China. And scoping out for those in the audience who are unfamiliar with Australia-China relations, China is and still is our biggest trading partner. But because we're a close alliance with the US, with Washington and the Pentagon and Wall Street, etc., in fact, we're part of that US imperial clock in the Pacific, and we actually carry out US foreign policy. Australia can do a few things within its own right, as long as it has approval by Washington. But what we've basically been told now, and especially during the Trump era, during the peak of Trump's presidency, was on the attack. The diplomatic relations have now worsened a lot more. They're trying to whip up a lot of racism and a lot of fear about China. We're talking about China being a national security risk, which it's not. China's made absolutely clear they're not even interested and attacking us or invading us, but we seem to be doing in the war footing. And take into account, Australia has about three key US installation bases, one in Darwin, one just off Western Australia there, and also you have Pine Gap, which is the major spy thing that covers most of the world, as well as a joint US-Australia facility, but it's basically a spy base. And what happens is, and what we're basically doing, basically what Australia's been given its order from Wall Street, from Washington. We don't care about your trade deals with China anymore. Go on, it's time to support our stance against China and circling China. And obviously, and the consequence of that is deteriorating trade relations further. So they're putting tariffs on wine exports to China. Obviously, beef and other food items such as seafood and wheat and grains, but also now coal as well. Mind you, though, taking into account what the media is not explaining here is that also China's looking to go into the renewable sector, greener energy, developing fusion energy, and to stop their reliance and dependency on the fossil fuel sector, and obviously advance further, because China wants to play a leading role in the climate change and in trying to reforest and green their technology further. So what we're seeing out of this is further relations just deteriorating. Our last big primary export to China is iron ore. Australia does mine a lot of high grade iron ore throughout the world, but China's the biggest customer. Obviously, they haven't touched that yet, and the media's going on, well, they still need our iron ore, but China, reading through Global Times, that China's just old now. They're just basically saying how stupid their respective governments have been in the diplomatic relations, and they're saying that basically it would be Australia that becoming they'll be the one hurting through all this. And in fact, like I explained in our other videos, it's actually working class people who are going to be paying for all this if there's further crisis, because what's happening, Australia is going to be losing its prime biggest trading partner and a big market share. And a lot of people go, woohoo, we get to make things here again. Yeah, we will be anyway. I think whether we're invadable Australia, we'll have to have some form of self-reliance. But what happens, all the European powers and other market in the UK, and no doubt a lot of other US as well, are circling and to move in and trying to have a bigger share of the Chinese market and push us out completely. And I mean, the amount of times Australia's fallen for it. Iraq was a classic example when the Howard government, the government of John Howard sided with Tony Blair and George W. Bush to invade Iraq. One of the three key countries to go to war against Iraq. Well, Iraq was one of our biggest exporters for wheat, and we lost that export market. After that invasion, guess who got it? Everyone else did, bar us. So we're losing out completely. And it's interesting. I've said to a lot of people I've come across, I said, "What's happening to Australia?" Yeah, its so-called allies are patting it on the back. Yeah, good on you. Standing up to China, and they've got a knife in the other hand, ready to stab straight in the back. Thank you for your market. We've got that now, and pushed us completely out. So that's that's the downfall of that, and then the big downfall of it. It's actually we're the ones who are going to be suffering, because our government certainly shows complete contempt during this COVID-19, and they do not care and give us complete contempt as well, even with any type of deteriorating trade relations.
Right, so I just want to talk about you. Am I coming in? All right. So in the United States, there's a whole resource colony of Appalachia, and it has been historically one of the most poverty-stricken areas, with its own culture. And then recent years, with the downturn in coal, there has been destruction of jobs, an emergence of drugs, and underground economy, and untold suffering. Maybe you could tell us a little bit. And, I'm a truck driver. I'm from the mountains up in upstate New York, but I drove through there and met and talked with the people. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about Australians' coal mining communities.
Certainly. Well, predominantly the the major coal producing regions such as North Queensland and also part of southeastern Queensland around Ipswich, and then obviously New South Wales, you have the Hunter Valley, western New South Wales, just west of the Blue Mountains in Sydney, and southern New South Wales coalfields. Some of those coal-dependent communities, such they've suffered a lot through economic hardship. That drugs are rife as well. We've got, unfortunately, Australia, a lot of regional Australia, but in the cities as well, we've got a major problem with crystal methamphetamine, or otherwise known as ice. That's been rife in a lot of those country towns and regional areas, but ones that depended on mining have suffered significantly from it. A lot of infrastructure is not put there anymore, but also the deteriorating environment around them. A very good friend of mine and comrade of mine lives in Muswellbrook, which is in the upper Hunter Valley of New South Wales. But traditionally a coal mining town. BHP is one of the big players in there, so is Rio Tinto, and I believe Glencore, and other major multinational coal companies in there. And the amount of coal dust that's through town, you can actually, when I visit him, you can actually taste it. That you can actually breathe it, and a lot of people have respiratory problems as well. It's simple thing. It's just how bad is you can put your laundry out to dry on the clothesline, come back and reveal this fine soot from the coal. So it blows in the air. And the thing is too, all that upper Hunter, it's a major river system. It's called the Hunter system, Hunter River, that flows into Newcastle and out to the Pacific. And it's a major waterway for agricultural and recreational and etc. And the fact is, the amount of pollutants that will be seeping into that. Well, for starters, there's just been in the last 2 years a major coal mine built at Muswellbrook, in one of the towns there, and it was actually the place was built called Mount Pleasant. Now it's been changed to Mount Unpleasant because it's open cut. Where the coal washery is right on top of the hill. Now, when you wash coal, it's not like that of just putting a piece of coal under a bit of water and soap and wash it with a bit of soap, and there you go. You got to have a clean piece of coal. What it basically is it's a chemical process. So what happens is the chemical, when it washes the coal, it develops this black sludge. Now, if you don't contain it, and that gets into the waterway, that's completely polluted and contaminated the waterway. The waterways, such as the Hunter River, a lot of agriculture is dependent on it, from growing of fruit, vegetables, from raising livestock, etc. So all that deteriorates. And the mining industry, along with the environment, there was a long history, along with the mining history and human rights violations. Well, there's a long history. It seems to be like a very cutthroat industry. So here in Australia, it's no different from what it is in the Appalachian Mountains of the US. And basically, any decision to close a mine down is made from a boardroom from overseas, and they don't have no regards whatsoever what it does to the community, where unemployment and drug abuse and alcoholism will obviously increase further, and instability in working class people's lives there, because once again, they're the ones who suffer as well. And along with too the mining industry, they have no regards to the indigenous culture of that as well, as to the land either. With the first people of this country, of the First Nations of this country, there's a lot of sacred sites to get completely destroyed or permanently damaged through the mining practices. So they suffer as well, losing some of their cultural heritage and attachment to the land as well. And mind you, the Indigenous population here in Australia is probably one of the world's oldest culture. A lot of languages have been around since well long before the first buildings were built anywhere overseas and that. And so what you're seeing is a very ancient culture that's still alive, but slowly industries like the mining industry will still, even though they like to put the public relations out there and the big smiley face, we do a lot, we're trying to preserve it. They absolutely have no regard for that at all.
It's getting a little bit late. I think we're going to skip the rest of the news items. We're going to go into our interview portion. So I have let me see, I have an image here. There we go. So we're very glad to have with us Gavin Lockard. I actually did an interview with Gavin. If folks want to go back and check that out, that is obviously going to be more in depth than this shorter section of an interview. So we're very glad to have the young folks around us represented in the discussions, get that perspective that what folks are going through coming up now with these worsening conditions and what have you. So Gavin, maybe we could start off by telling us just a quick bit about your background and some of your positions. And
yeah, sure. Well, my background is I grew up in Moline, Illinois, which is, like I said, right on the border of Illinois and Iowa. And my parents both worked in the public school systems. And I got into socialist ideology, I guess, by reading and also by sort of, talking to people and their lived experiences. And when it comes to my positions, I really feel like the only societies in the world that have ever eliminated unemployment and illiteracy and all the other scourges of the earth completely have been socialist and communist countries. And so, if somebody could point to me a better system that has done more in that regard, I'm certainly open to hearing it. But as far as I can tell, centrally planned economies work and are the best that they're not perfect, but they're the best we can do, which is you hear that a lot about capitalism, but it's actually so true about socialism. And if you'd like me to tell you a little bit more in depth about Sinai, I certainly could.
right on. That was my next question. Can you tell us a little bit about Students and Youth for a New America?
Students and Youth for a New America, or SINA, however you want to pronounce it, SINA, is an organization of young people who love their country. Our love for America is not a justification for mindless conformity. Rather, our patriotism motivates us to work hard toward building a better future for the people of the United States, as well as the rest of the world. The crisis facing the United States is having a severe impact on youth. While older generations of Americans could live comfortably with good-paying industrial jobs, young Americans struggle to survive in low-wage service sector jobs. The streets of formerly prosperous neighborhoods are now flooded with foreclosed homes. The costs of education have increased exponentially, while the opportunities opened up by a college degree have significantly decreased. Rising rates of drug addiction consume and destroy the lives of millions, along with their families and their communities. Far too many young Americans are locked in prison. Millions more are stuck in a cycle of short-term jobs that offer inadequate pay, while they struggle to make payments on astronomical student loan debts. Meanwhile, our highways and bridges are crumbling. Our fire departments, power plants, water treatment facilities, and hospitals are in a chronic state of dysfunction. We in SINA say that the time has come for American rebirth. The international situation is becoming increasingly bleak. Acts of terror so frequently occur that we have become almost desensitized to their horror. Millions of people have become refugees as their homelands are reduced to chaos. The world is faced with the possibility of some kind of large-scale global confrontation. The failure to adequately address the problem of global climate change, or global heating, has yielded many serious consequences. We in SINA have not given up our hopes for global stability and a prosperous, peaceful tomorrow, but we know that this can only be achieved by an upsurge of people's democracy. Many young Americans have become discouraged. They feel like their increasingly difficult lives are of little concern to the rich and powerful. The time has come for us to push past those who would silence us. We must step forward and halt the march toward economic collapse and global catastrophe. SINA is an organization of young people that strive to create peace, jobs, democracy, and equality. The time has come for American youth to protect and care for each other. The time has come for American youth to reject the selfishness and individualism promoted in the media and to embrace a sense of community and egalitarianism. The time has come for American youth to study their history and learn about the difficulties that have been overcome by previous generations. The time has come for American youth to reject the hate, racism, sexism, and all forms of bigotry designed to redirect our anger against each other and push the country into further chaos and decay. The time has come for American youth to defend the civil liberties and freedoms which have long been cherished in this society and reject the calls for a greater police state or any new aggressive wars. The time has come for American youth to take history into their own hands and fight for a new America that is no longer ruled by senseless greed, but rather by universal human values and cooperation. SINA is an organization that engages in service, study, and struggle. This is our obligation. We cannot allow any more lives to be destroyed by a failing economic order. We will work to learn about the forgotten revolutionary heritage of America's working people. It is not only the slave owners, racist settlers, and cowboys who built the United States. Our veins also contain the blood of abolitionists, labor organizers, suffragists, and revolutionary warriors. We will work to promote international understanding and cooperation across the globe. Patriotism means loving your own country, not displaying hatred or hostility toward another. We need a government of action to fight for working families.
Right on. That was a great statement. Wow.
Thank you.
Inspired.
You know,
That's strong. That's strong. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like many organizations, I'm not going to lie to you, SINA has been hit hard by the pandemic. And so we've been doing a lot of online organizing. And so if you're watching this and you're in school of any kind, grad school, college, high school, or if you're just a young person who's working a job and is interested in SINA, please join, send me a message. We need people who are interested in setting up clubs around the country and spreading the ideas that we know are necessary in order to build a better America and a better world. So please, I really do appeal to all of the viewers to that if you are interested in this and you are either youth or a student of any kind, to please join SINA.
Yeah, can I say something? I think actually, despite the difficulties that's thrown at you guys when COVID-19, especially for all working class organisations or student organisations throughout the year, I think one thing I have to congratulate you. You are on the right path, I think, and I think you will go in leaps and bounds. I mean, it's as Lennon once said, struggle is a long and tedious one. But certainly, I believe you actually guys are on the right path there, and well done. I congratulate you for being organised and organising further as well. Sounds like you're going to be a fighting force.
You too, David. I know you're leading the good fight in Australia, and there's work to be done everywhere, most certainly. And it's in terms of. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Dustin?
No, go ahead. You continue.
And I mean, we need to when it comes to I know people mentioned Ocasio and Dorr and a lot of people. We really need to demand justice and accountability from elected officials. Even though it's I don't think that Joe Biden is going to be a particularly receptive person when it comes to the demands of the working class. That certainly is no reason to throw in the towel and say, oh, well, we should never go on strike. We should never call our elected officials. We should never do anything because, the government works for us. I mean, obviously the government doesn't work for us and it hasn't been for a long time, but we need people to do the hard and thankless work of really saving this world.
Right. So this is it hasn't happened very often, but there's kind of there's a bit of a concern here in the comment thread. And I believe you addressed it, but maybe we can address it further.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Alex here is, what is there to love about America? I personally have no idea. And I think you addressed it, but if you want to expand on that further, maybe some of the reaction. I know on Left Book and other places, that is not a popular word to use.
Right. So would you say that there's nothing to admire about the abolitionist struggle in America or the women's suffrage struggle or the civil rights movement? I mean, in terms of this question, I would also have to flip it back around and say that if the person is coming from the perspective of America was founded on slavery and genocide, would you say the same thing about Cuba and Venezuela? Because they were founded on slavery and genocide. So I don't mean to be combative, but I'm just wondering, it's I ask people to think things through because a lot of countries have unfortunately, ethnic cleansing as part of their founding, and that certainly doesn't mean that there are no
you're not
qualities of countries.
You're not defending those things.
No,
you're not
certainly
defending
not.
those.
And I mean, those are ugly stains on our history that can never be washed away. But it's sometimes that can be misused as an excuse for pessimism and saying that things can never be changed, which is what I want to get away from.
Yeah. Look, we've got that same.
I think I did. Go ahead.
We've got a very similar situation in Australia, because I mean, Australia's to its record of nearly wiping out its indigenous population for over 200 years. It's recorded there the massacres, the displacement, the stealing of the young children, the enslavement of those people. Yeah, we had slavery too, bringing people from the South Pacific to work in the cane fields of North Queensland, for example. We've had a lot of things in this country. It's got a sinister history to it, if you want to put it that way. So good, but like you're correctly saying, if we're just going to concentrate on that, and we're actually, that we're not going to get anywhere. There's a lot of things we should be building on. I mean, we've got a good history of class struggle here in this country. Very rich history, even predating the Goldfields rebellions of the 1850s, further on, between even the Battle of Vinegar Hill between Irish rebel convicts and against the British troops there in Sydney. Vinegar Hills in Sydney there. Maybe that's where it started. There was many struggles as well throughout the 1800s right up through to now. And I think we should actually build on that rich tradition of struggle in the US. I mean, that's where the land of the Wobblies. That's something to be built on, something to be proud of, and the land of William Z. Foster and all them, to build on those traditions as well. I mean, you guys, and that's something to be proud of too. I mean, on the dust, but there was others, especially something that was also a country that overcame slavery as well, and had to fight a second revolution. I mean, you're one of the first countries there to fight against royalty in the sense where, in your first war of independence. I mean, wasn't anyone else for that matter. So, I mean, it just comes to show you guys do have a rich history, and to build on. I think just concentrate, and like ourselves here, we just concentrate, well, there's nothing to love about it. Well, I think we're just, being pessimistic. It's just, to me, it's also an excuse not to do anything either. I think we've got to look at it. Yes, we acknowledge this is all the stuff that's happened. We're not trying to avoid it, but we've also got a very rich history of struggle and against our own rulers as well.
Class is not the only thing that matters, but it's the only thing that unites us all.
That's right.
Yeah, I think I did a good episode of Anti-Imperialist America, where I read the interview with a member of the Young Patriots organization, which was a part of the original Rainbow Coalition with the Black Panthers, and they talked about a High Thornton, who was a economic refugee from the South and lived in a white slum in Chicago of other economic refugees, mostly from the South, in the 70s. And they were able to mobilize their community. And when they were going out to the community, they're like, what are some things that we can apply to people? And one of the universal things was patriotism. But it was more of an emphasis on revolutionary patriotism, meaning the positive elements: John Brown, Harriet Tubman, abolitionists, Union fighters. I had last week I interviewed the comrade Chicano nationalist from Aztlan, the Southwest, and a lot of the stuff that he was trying to talk about was the beauty of Aztlan and the beauty of the people and the way they've struggled. And about and unlocking that hidden history. And I believe there's a hidden history in the United States overall of people resisting and coming up. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more of some of those hopeful ideas and the need to get out of the movement and to the masses.
Sorry.
This directed to David or me?
No, yourself.
Right. Well, you know, I've been a little bit involved in the movement, that is the protest movement, and certainly, I'm sure both of you have been as well. But the problem is that, by and large, the protest movement is a group of self-congratulating people who are not in touch with the broad masses of people in this country and in David's country of Australia. And so I myself have, there have been times when I, have been so out of touch. I mean, I have some learning disabilities, and I've been in school my whole life, so it's kind of, sometimes it can be a situation where somebody can, hit you with a question or a point of view, and you can just, if you're not used to talking to people, you can just be stunned by what normies think, as some people might say. And so students and young people are, I mean, I'm one of them, obviously, are critically important in any sort of revolutionary movement, but they are certainly not the only factor, and certainly not the most important factor. All revolutions, as you said, have involved, successful ones have involved patriotism, and all social and political revolutions have involved, a new mass participation of all broad sectors of people. So it always involves many people who were apolitical becoming more political because the economic necessity demanded it, and sort of their backs were against the wall, you could say. Workers, farmers, intellectuals, many different strata of life.
Any response, Dave Fox, or further questions?
Well, I think it's vitally important. You raised a very good point. A lot of people think the protest is the be-all, end-all of everything, to be making sure we have these large protests. A protest is not a revolution. It's an actual tactic, and unfortunately, it's being used in such a way now. It's there just to stroke a few egos and just look. Oh, look, I was up there again. Look at me all the time. The fact is, yes, protests are essential as a tactic moving forward, show of strength, be it from a strike, where we had a strike wave and we hit the streets. Yep, it's to show the strength in numbers and obviously showing public opposition to something. Is a protest, though, the actual movement itself going anywhere? No. There's obviously all these other tactics to make that have to be put in the process for social change. And like yourself, I actually related to complete what you've said. I've seen it myself for many years. Yeah, we've been involved in all these rallies and that, and it seems to be the same group of people. And interesting stuff, most of those people that wants to be kings of the protest cage are all middle class, and they're leading nothing, as far as I care. And they're not even coming up with any solutions to anything. They don't address the root cause of the problem. What's the primary cause behind all this? How we got here in the first place? And they offer no solution on the way forward as well. So certainly it's vitally essential, and agree that we have to get out of that movement and get into the masses. Anything, because a lot of these groups and that, they're so far removed from everyday struggle of working class people throughout our respective countries. And obviously, when you talk to them about that, they just don't want to know about it. They just want to have their egos stroked. And I got told, I found out the other day, someone was talking about me that I had no understanding. I don't have a really good understanding of Marxism. Well, sorry, but I'd like to actually put, if those people are listening in, sorry, but I like being engaged with the masses. That's where we put it all to practice, isn't it? And so going back to it, we've got a very similar situation here in Australia as well. With all these little left groups, they're not really attached to anything, and that's vitally important. But it is that vital important. And I actually thought Caleb Morpin hit the nail on the head. I think it would have been about 2 days ago, one of his live chats, when he mentioned, he actually gave us the task ahead, the importance of engaging with the masses. If we want to stop fascism and actually also want to move to a system of socialism, we have to engage with the masses. One way or the other. It's no point just being these little grouplets and have these protests isolated from everybody else, and actually just find it that they're not even attractive enough for any working class people at all.
I think you raised a very important issue. I mean, we're not the only group or to talk about this. I think in the broader sense, it's movementism. And a lot of people have been calling out movementism, which is an emphasis on the movement, even back to the original reformist Bernstein. The movement is everything. The goal is nothing. Reformism. They lose sight of where they're going. And the movement is largely controlled by the Democratic Party. And it seems to just echo what MSNBC is saying 10 times louder. Meanwhile, working people who know nothing about socialism, especially, and I believe there is a bit of a labor aristocracy in the United States, and people were not going to, but that is quickly dwindling. There's been a history of that since the 1970s, I think it was at max. But I mean, I've come to the realization we're in the period of super monopolization. And it seems like even though the United States is the core, we have less of a labor aristocracy and worse conditions than Europe and Australia, where I believe the bourgeoisie is actually it's not as strong here. The bourgeoisie is so strong, becomes so potent and so murderous and so destabilizing. It doesn't even think it needs a labor aristocracy anymore. So it ships jobs overseas and it takes away resources, and you have this growing and then McCarthyism on top of that, where they've robbed us. Almost every country in the United States has a communist party in almost every neighborhood. And we don't have that in the United States. So we have an emergence of people without health care, people with lower wages, youth living in their parents' house up into their 30s because they're not given the dignity of a job that can self-sustain them. And I think there's a lot of material conditions are ripe to organize the proletariat and oppressed nations in the United States. Any further thoughts, Gavin?
Just a brief point. I mean, I would say, and terminology matters sometimes. I think when we say masses, I personally think of Mao Zedong and, some of these debatable translations from the Chinese language. And I think we ought to use the word the people. Some people in the U.S. have been convinced that the term masses is condescending. It's not. That's not the intention of it. But I think that we need to get out of the movement and go to the people. And we are the people. We are the masses, Dust and David and Gavin right here, and so many other people are as well. I mean, we don't get to just live off of other people's labor. Not that it's wrong to own a business. I think there needs to be a market sector under a revolutionary socialist government, but that profits should not be in command. And that I think that a lot of people can relate to the message of how really profits have a stranglehold over our whole society, and that there is a dictatorship in the United States, and it's the dictatorship of profits. Profits, not PHATS.
And that's
Were you going to say something, David? I think I'm going to cut you off.
That's right. I actually sometimes our terminology can be a little bit foreign for some people. I think sometimes to address that, but I've been in many talks about that over the years, how we use our terminology as well. I mean, once ourselves, we understand what that's about, but obviously when you're talking to the common people and that, obviously we look at our terminology, how we use it as well, and obviously how we come across and actually explain what socialism really is. It's just it's an economy organised around a central plan. Production is organised in a rash way, not for profit. We can actually, even I like the term, we can get rich without capitalism. We can enrich our lives without capitalism. When people are saying, "Oh, well, what about this and poverty and everything?" we can say we can finally address these needs and lift everyone out of poverty, and we can we can look at it that way. It depends on how the terminology is. If I say, vote 1 David Fox for a Soviet Australia, you can see that's not going to go too far as well. You know what I mean? It just will go straight across to think, well, hang on, that's a Russian thing, isn't it? That's something that's really foreign to everybody. But we need something to just be aware of our language and what at times our vocabulary when we're dealing with some of these people. Look, we're not going to get it perfect by any means. By any means at all. We will sort of make those mistakes. Nothing's going to be perfect, but at least if we try and change the terminology at times, I think that's vitally important. I like, I know there's been mentions about Caleb, and we've mentioned it here too, but how he's come across. And I think that's been, for me, that's been a big lesson learned as well. I thought, there's another way about doing these things as well. It's not the traditional, we must have a vanguard party with the hammer and the sickle, and this is how it's got to be, and me, the great leader, and everything else. And it might have worked for a particular time, but it didn't work now. We're in a different era. And I think one thing about scientific socialism, or the science of socialism, it's a living thing. It changes, it consistently updates, it adjusts itself to the material conditions, the modern material conditions of the particular era. It'll be interesting to see what's going to be like in 100 years' time, and what the conversation those generations will be having then. Hopefully they'd have socialism by then, and they were well on the way to a classless society. But if you know what I mean, how terminology in that, I mean, obviously Marx and Engels used words and terminology adjusted to their time and era and the conditions they were under. So did Lenin, so did all the many other great revolutionary leaders from that time. But now we're in the third decade of the 21st century, in a different time and era, and how we operate and talk to people will be fundamentally different from what we did over 100 years ago. But that doesn't stop us. The spirit still stays alone. We can enhance that spirit though.
That's one of the things that distinguishes scientific socialism from utopian socialism, and frankly from many other mainstream political ideologies, is that we are willing to adapt and change. If an idea does not hold up to scrutiny, it gets thrown in the rubbish. And so I think that as scientific socialists, we are always willing to change and adapt and look at new evidence.
Yeah. I'll give you a close example. I was talking to someone the other day. They said, "What do you think of this piece they want to do?" They're saying socialism is equal. Part of it was equal distribution and everything. And I went, "No, it's not. No, it's not." And I pulled them back on that, and I said, "No, it's not. It's the economy. The economy is organised in a rash way around a central plan where material abundance is increased, the productive force is increased, and everyone is able to enrich their lives and have rich lives." I'm not talking about having a big whopping mansion and a few limousines. I'm not talking about that, but they have enriched lives. They're comfortable. They are living quite well. So that's, and they obviously they admitted their mistake. They think, "Oh, yeah, okay, we." They didn't realise they never saw it that way before, because that was what's taught to them. They thought it was just an equal distribution and everything else. No, it didn't work that way at all. So, but look, everyone, it's always something. Even myself, I make mistakes. I learn something new every day. One or the other too. Dustin, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think what I found really attractive about Students and Youth for a New America, not only are they appealing to the working class, proletariat, oppressed masses, they have a strong anti-imperialist stance. The parent organization, Center for Political Innovation, published Gaddafi's Green Book, a strong African anti-imperialist. They put out a statement on Syria. I was looking through my Facebook. I shared out the statement that was written on Syria. Maybe you can, and usually one would think like, oh, you're applying to working people. Like, aren't these people xenophobic? But I think that's changing. Maybe you could talk a little bit more on that issue.
Yeah, and we're the most anti-imperialist, and one of the few socialist organizations in the U.S. that does not cower toward mainstream "that wasn't real socialism" type narratives. And we feel that any country that is improving the lives of its people sincerely and is resisting against imperialism is deserving of our support, and that we should always try to find out about the truth about any country, you know, the good and the bad. And certainly all countries have good and bad, but largely what is fed to us in the mainstream media about these countries that are succeeding in other ways, or at least are trying to resist imperialism, that information is very, very misleading at best, and sometimes outright false and fabricated. And, you know, there's fair.org. There's a couple of, there's grayzone.com. There's a number of websites that do fact checks on this kind of situation. And it seems to me like if you were a big capitalist who wants the proles to stop revolting, the best thing you could do tactically would be to convince them that socialism has never worked anywhere, and that these countries are all run by mean, evil dictators, and that the best system is the free market system. I think that there has often been, unfortunately, among many good socialists and communists, there has been a unwillingness to defend countries that are under attack from imperialist powers, when that's one of the things that is, critically necessary when Venezuela is facing, international blockades, and then there's this new almost new Cold War against China, that we need international solidarity everywhere among workers and farmers everywhere, and people everywhere who have humane values. And Mao said imperialism is the primary contradiction. There's a lot of debate about whether that's correct or not, but there's no real way in my mind to divorce socialism from international solidarity. And as the IWW used to say, the Wobblies, an injury to one is an injury to all.
That's so right. How do we apply that? Go ahead.
I was just saying that's a good saying, that one, injury one to injury to all. The other one actually I've always enjoyed was touch one, touch all. Over to you, Dustin.
So I just want to get into, how do you apply solidarity on an international scale? What is an injury to one? What is an injury to one is an injury to all mean when our government is destroying whole regions, putting whole regions into poverty and mass chaos and underdevelopment for decades to come?
Well, I think education cannot be stressed enough. It's really important to have educational seminars and forums about what's really going on internationally and in many countries' struggles. We can talk about India, China, so many places, and that if people are not made aware of some of the truths that go against the mainstream media, then they'll be in the darkness forever. And so I think that people have to locally organize educational events on international issues, as well as, of course, local issues matter the most in terms of change starts from below, and we have to do that. But never say that never adopt a chauvinist attitude of, oh, those people over there, they don't matter, or something. It's many people, unfortunately, many of us are naturally out of sight, out of mind. And I think that it's our duty to combat that as if we are the international working class.
Right on. That's a great note to end the the interview on, and we're talking about reaching out to working folks, getting them involved in socialism, reaching out to people based on their economic conditions, apply to people's better sentiments, including being anti-war and standing in solidarity with the brothers and sisters who are under the brute of U.S. imperialism, the same group of oil companies and bankers that are keeping down our wages, denying us public services. So we go to work, we go to talk to our fellow workers. A lot of time what they repeat is just the bourgeois media, and we have to be able to expel that force. So David Fox has prepared a few statements that a fellow worker or unprincipled leftist might say. Maybe you can go ahead and start and test me on one. We'll get this workshop rolling.
Well, what's this talk about? We're trying to make changes here, engaging with the majority of the people. Shouldn't we actually be joining the major parties and trying to take it over? They're there, like similar to a corporate takeover. We've got the numbers. Let's move in. Let's take them over.
I would suggest people look at my last live. I read an article from Karena Kripaez of Telejaguar Media, and she talked about people who have tried to join the Democratic Party and change it. It has happened over and over and over again. I've shared that article out, but basically the result has been the Democratic Party doesn't change anything. Conditions get worse, and the movement fizzles out. And it's happened over and over again. What has happened to our wages in the last 30 years? What has happened to healthcare? What has happened to the price of education? What has happened to the price of goods? What has happened to the price of our rent? There's been Democratic activists doing exactly what you're telling me to do, and we have gotten nowhere. It's time we do something else. We should be building working class power on the community and labor level to fight against the global system of imperialism. I mean, I won't say it like that, but that's my basic position. I think those economic issues that I just talked on will really stand out to working folks. That nothing has changed. We got to try something new. How would you respond to that, Gavin?
Well, Deng Xiaoping once said it doesn't matter what color a cat is as long as it catches mice. So in theory, I'm not opposed to people joining the two major parties. But the problem with that is that a person that, socialists, they would lay out their ideas, and then the people in the two major parties would say, that's communism. See ya. And so it seems to me that because of how bought off the parties are, especially at the higher levels and at the federal level in the really extreme, that there is this is not necessarily the way to go. And I think that this may sound liberal to you guys, but to me, my take on this is that getting money out of politics is a necessary but not sufficient condition to towards opening the door to building socialism. And there have been a number of proposed methods. I know some groups think that we should lobby the federal government to sort of get more AOCs elected, and that way there could be a constitutional amendment to ban corporate donations and publicly fund all elections. I think that is pretty unrealistic. You're basically trying to outspend Wall Street at that point. I'm an advocate of going to the state level and calling for an amendment there, and we've actually gotten 5 states to at the state congresses to pass this amendment. I mean, that's one thing, but in a sense, I can also see that that could take forever, and we shouldn't wait. And so, at the same time, we need to be having educational seminars and strikes. There should be a general strike. Where hasn't there been one already? In terms of making actual demands, and also just educating people and educating ourselves in terms of that there really are other possibilities out there for a better world, and that we don't have to take this low wage police state anymore.
Technically, can you blow into your mic very quickly? a little bit of an audio distortion.
You sound a bit
Gavin.
hollow or something. Yeah.
Just blow into your mic and then try to speak. Yeah. And then try to speak.
All right, I'm speaking. How do I sound?
It's a little better. That's fine. Okay, David Fox. How would you respond to that?
Well, if obviously the question is, it has been shown that the two major parties are parties of capital and they're parties of imperialism for starters. And how they're structured, yeah, sure, anyone can join as long as they accept the party line, their party policy. Yet, I'm sure they could have motions put forward and some positions adopted. Doesn't actually tie those politicians to that decision as well. And I understand it's they're obviously the politicians, the people in government, are totally separated from the party rank and file or the party membership. So obviously to use that will to try and join the major parties and trying to win mass numbers to change their course. Well, obviously when it comes down to their party conferences or party congresses, the decisions there are not binding on the politicians either. So really, in us, one aspect, it is a method in futility trying to move that forward, and their parties of capital. It's like they are there primarily to help manage the capitalist system on behalf of capital. That's what they are, and that's what they're primarily there for. It's like trying to turn to it's trying to boil a rock and think you're going to get the same results of boiling an egg.
Yeah, and one of the problems that some people have pointed out is that the Democratic and Republican parties are not even parties in the traditional definition of the word. I mean, they don't have a membership that actually votes on decisions and is correctly bound by a constitution in that sense. I mean, it's literally the Democratic and Republican parties are not parties in that sense. They're enormous coalitions around different factions of the ruling class, I guess you could say.
So, so you got any more of those? Maybe say what perspective it's coming from before going with it. Was that the only? Would you have any more prepared for the?
Well, more. Well, then shouldn't we actually be or either joining one of the current left parties or starting one of ourselves so we can make those reforms within capitalism and to make this place a better place?
I'm a little confused by.
I'll rephrase that. Let me have a think for a sec. Well, if we want some certain reforms to come in place, making mere reforms, actually, I'll go back to the old Bernstein. So shouldn't we just reform the system itself without having to actually go to this effort of trying to actually start a new organisation or trying to see going out to the masses? All we need to do is make a few reforms, and be it from healthcare, education, and maybe even put a policy of full employment, perhaps. There would be no need to overthrow capital. Well, take that back, not overthrow, but change capitalism to socialism.
Okay, so the argument is basically gradualism, that the sum of reforms will eventually equal socialism.
I do apologize.
And I might. Okay, that's fine. I think specifically applied to the United States, like that might have made sense back in the time of the Second International. People can go back and watch the study that me and David Fox did on the history of the three internationals. During the Second International, the unions were actually improving their conditions. And then in the Soviet Union, if you read Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, he talks about the reason why the communist revolution came to Russia, because it was on the outskirts of imperialism and had some of the strongest contradictions. I think the United States being it's interesting. It's actually the soul of the imperialist camp. But because they're so arrogant, because they're so full of themselves, because they've allowed capital to become privatized to the point where they're taking away our services, they're taking away our wages, there's more and more and more room to organize. And you're not going to reform a decaying imperialist system that spends trillions of dollars on war and doesn't give people health care, gives health care to the people of Israel so they can keep the Palestinians in concentration camps. And when you have this empire that's dying and striking out all over the world, they need the poverty draft. They don't want to give us health care and education because they were scared of what happened in Vietnam. They were scared of people burning their draft cards and students resisting. So now they have the poverty draft, and they need people not to have health care. I trained a lot of former military people how to drive tractor trailers. And a lot of them will say, well, you should join the military and then you can have basic services. It's like they're holding these basic services that we produce hostage. So we'll join this military that's spending all the money to get these social services in the first place. I mean, how are you going to reform that? We have to build power and demand those services. We have to retool and rechange the entire system to fit our purposes and put the needs of the people before the profits of the greedy.
And let me just add, you say make a few reforms, but Northern European countries have made a few reforms, and they don't have socialism. They still have unemployment and illiteracy and a market economy run amok that still has cycles of crashes and banking crises. So that argument of make a few reforms doesn't compel me at all. And furthermore, the reforms that Northern European countries have had, such as maternity leave and national health care, those were brought on because the governments of those Western capitalist countries were scared of the Soviet Union that had invented those things, and they didn't want to revolt in their own country of the workers. So it all goes back to having a revolutionary government that's going to fight for the people.
Yep, and you're absolutely right there. Actually describing that. Yes, and certainly the same situation here in Australia many years is because we had the USSR and we also had a very well organised working class, and especially after the Second World War, a lot of them returned service, but a lot of people returning from war as well at that time. There was a lot of support for the Communist Party, and also people were sick to death of living in poor conditions, such as what the Great Depression imposed on them over that era from after World War One. Obviously, there were a lot of big demands. So even here, they said, well, all right, we'll guarantee you full employment, guarantee you be able to pay your house off within X amount of years, and all these other things. So people started to live quite comfortably here in Australia as well. And basically they'll say, well, there's no need to change. We're doing quite well. And for me, and for some, there was an element of truth. I mean, they're living quite comfortable. Their needs were being met. For human survival, what are our common needs? Clothing, food, shelter, and water, and obviously modern area, utilities and other communication methods. But now capitalism can no longer provide for that. It's obviously we need to look at that fundamental change and changing to a new society, aka socialism. So I'll leave it at that. I think actually I thought about trying to ask another question, but you pretty much took the sting out of any further questions I wanted to ask you. So I thought you pretty much answered it. There's no point. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
It's good we're getting our practice in, sparring a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to do this type because sometimes you be caught off guard. It's in Toastmasters, we call it impromptu speaking. Someone asks a question straight out of, I'll use the term out of left field, and you think, oh, I'm going to answer it, and trying to articulate, move around it, and that. But it's a good form of impromptu speaking because we're going to come across a lot of this throughout our lives and throughout our struggle.
Amen to that, brother.
Right on. Looks like we're getting near the end. Anybody else got anything to say before we do our ending chant?
Well, it was a pleasure listening and meeting you and listening to you, Gavin. It was really inspiring stuff. I think you guys, once again, you guys are on the right track. and I think anyone tries to come in and tell you what to do, I know what the response would be to that. I think you guys are doing a fantastic work there. It's a big road ahead. And it's refreshing to see. Actually, it's interesting because it's just a bit of food for thought. We do have a worker and student alliance here although predominantly in Melbourne, young people as well. So maybe I'll have talk with them. And they actually pretty much were hindered by this whole COVID-19 pandemic as well. Weren't able to do much, but they were quite active right up to not so, and they still are, but when they're in their capacity. So just gave me an idea. I thought I might approach one of them to come and do one of these live chats with us as well.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us tonight, especially on short notice. Gavin Lockard, Students and Youth for a New America. Great to have you on. Hopefully, maybe you can return sometime. I think we're going to change the way we do the chant. I've been saying 3, 2, 1, and we just say it. I think I'm just going to do a repeat after me for our ending chant. I say something, y'all repeat it, and then we'll close after that. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle. Dare to win.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All right on, comrades. Good night, all. Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thanks so much for having me.
All the best. Thank you.
Good to meet you, Dave.